The auditorium lights dimmed as my son stepped onto the stage, clutching a guitar with chipped edges and a strap we'd sewn back together twice. The whispers started right away. "That poor boy," they said, eyes skimming his thrifted blazer, his scuffed sneakers, like those things could measure his worth. I gripped the edge of my seat, trying to breathe through the ache of knowing he heard them. My Leo, his shoulders set with a tension that belied his 14 years, his young face pale under the harsh stage lights. His fingers, usually so nimble, trembled slightly on the guitar's worn neck. He took a breath, a small, visible hitch in his chest, and I knew he was steeling himself, just as I'd taught him, just as life had taught us both. But before he could strum a single chord, a woman from the back row stood. Just stood. A silhouette against the faint exit sign, her movement drawing a ripple of annoyed hisses. "Sit down," someone muttered nearby. But she didn't. The air grew thick, expectant. Leo froze, his eyes darting towards the disturbance, his already fragile composure threatening to shatter. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped. Was this more mockery? Some new, crueler way to unnerve him? Then, her voice, clear and carrying, not loud but undeniably firm, sliced through the murmuring. "Excuse me," she said, her tone polite but edged with something that commanded attention. "I believe we're here to listen to the music, are we not? Perhaps we could afford this young man the courtesy of silence before he even begins." A stunned quiet fell over the auditorium, the kind of quiet that's heavy, uncomfortable. I could feel hundreds of eyes, previously flicking between Leo and their companions, now fixed on this unknown woman. Then, slowly, as if a collective spell had been broken, heads turned back towards the stage, towards my son. The judgment hadn't vanished, I knew it hadn't, but it had been paused. Interrupted. Leo swallowed, his gaze finding mine in the dimness for a fleeting second. I tried to pour every ounce of reassurance I had into that look, a silent message. Asterisk, you can do this. I'm here. Asterisk, he gave the smallest of nods, almost imperceptible, and turned back to the microphone. The memory of a different kind of judgment, colder and more sterile, flickered through me. A courtroom, years ago. The polished wood, the impassive faces, the scent of old paper and anxiety. Daniel, Leo's father, had sat there, calm and collected, while his lawyer painted me as unstable, incapable, the source of all our problems. His manipulation had been an art form, subtle and insidious, convincing everyone, even me at times, that our dwindling finances, our strained life, were solely my failing. The whispers then had been legal jargon, veiled accusations that stripped away my confidence layer by layer, leaving me raw and exposed. We'd lost so much in that battle, not just materially, but a part of our spirit. The thrifted blazer Leo wore wasn't just a garment, it was a testament to that loss, to the battles we'd fought to simply stay afloat. I remembered staring at the scuffed toes of my own shoes then, feeling the weight of every unspoken criticism, much like Leo must be feeling now. But Leo, my quiet, resilient Leo, had been my anchor. He'd never complained, not about the smaller apartment, the carefully budgeted meals, the clothes that weren't brand new. Instead, he'd found solace in music. That guitar, a cast-off from a distant cousin, had become his voice when words failed him, when the world felt too harsh. I remembered the evenings, long after I thought he was asleep, when I'd hear the soft, hesitant notes drifting from his room. He'd be hunched over it, the only light a small desk lamp casting a warm glow on his focused face, his brow furrowed in concentration. His fingers, still small then, would stumble, then try again, over and over. There were nights I'd find him asleep with the guitar still cradled in his arms, his cheek resting against the wood. The calluses on his fingertips were a roadmap of his dedication, tiny badges of honor he never showed off, but that I noticed every time he took my hand. "It sounds a bit off, Mom," he'd said one evening, a frown creasing his brow as he strummed a discordant chord. The old guitar had seen better days, its tuning pegs loose, its body scarred. We didn't have money for repairs, let alone a new one. So, we'd found tutorials online. Together, we'd carefully tightened screws, researched how to adjust the truss rod with a borrowed Allen key, and when the strap broke for the second time, I'd found a sturdy piece of canvas from an old tote bag, and we'd sat side by side at the kitchen table. Me carefully stitching it with dental floss, the strongest thread we had, while he held it taut. The chipped edges he'd once traced with a finger. "It has character, right?" he'd asked, a hopeful lilt in his voice. "More than character, sweetheart," I'd replied, my throat tight. "It has your heart in it." His dreams weren't of stadium tours or screaming fans. He told me once, his voice barely above a whisper, "I just want to make something beautiful, Mom. Something that makes people feel less alone. Like music does for me." That was Leo. Seeing beauty in the broken, seeking connection in a world that often felt determined to isolate him. The teasing had been a constant, low hum in the background of his school life. It had started subtly, a snicker in the hallway when he wore a patched-up pair of jeans, a dismissive wave from a group of boys when he tried to join a conversation. His quiet nature, his old-fashioned politeness, the very things I cherished in him, made him an easy target. "There goes String Bean Leo," one of the louder boys, Mark, would often call out, his cronies echoing with laughter. I'd seen the hurt flicker in Leo's eyes, quickly masked, but it was there, a tiny splinter in his soul. The teachers, for the most part, were oblivious, or, worse, offered a kind of pity that felt almost as damaging. Leo's a sensitive boy, Mrs. Davison, his English teacher, had told me during a parent-teacher conference, her smile gentle but her eyes assessing our slightly worn clothes. "He lives in his own little world a bit, doesn't he?" It wasn't meant unkindly, I knew, but it reinforced the idea that he was different, an outsider. This label of less than, of other, clung to him, as persistent as the scent of floor polish in the school corridors. He tried to shrug it off, to retreat further into his music, but I saw the toll it took, the slight slump in his shoulders, the way he'd avoid eye contact, the hesitance in his voice. My hands clenched tighter on the armrests, the cheap fabric rough under my palms. I was rooted to that chair, a maelstrom of fear and fierce, protective love churning within me. Every instinct screamed at me to rush to that stage, to shield him from those judging eyes, those casual cruelties. But another, deeper part of me, the part that had watched him painstakingly teach himself to play, that had seen his quiet determination in the face of every setback, knew I had to stay put. This was his moment, his battle. My fear was a suffocating blanket, yet beneath it, a fragile ember of trust in him glowed. He had a strength that ran deeper than bone, a resilience forged in quiet struggles and shared hopes. Leo adjusted the microphone, his Adam's apple bobbing. He looked out, not at the crowd, but somewhere above their heads, as if seeking a fixed point in a swaying sea. Then he took another breath, deeper this time, and his fingers, still trembling but with a new resolve, found their place on the strings. He began to play. It wasn't a flashy opening. Just a few simple, melancholic chords, hesitant at first, then growing a little stronger. The melody was unfamiliar, hauntingly beautiful, an original composition, I realized with a surge of pride. He'd been working on it for months, the notes drifting from his room like secrets. His voice, when he began to sing, was soft, a little unsteady, but pure and clear. It was a song about finding light in darkness, about the quiet strength of a single, flickering candle in a vast, echoing room. Asterisk, shadows fall and voices fade, a hollow heart, a serenade. Of whispered doubts and lonely fears, washing through the silent years, star. The whispers hadn't entirely stopped. A few snickers still rippled from a corner where Mark and his friends sat. I saw a teacher, Mr. Henderson, shoot them a half-hearted glare that did little to deter them. My stomach twisted. Asterisk, please, Leo, just keep going. Don't let them break you. Star. He faltered for a split second, his eyes flicking towards the sound of their laughter, his voice wavering on a note. My breath caught. This was it, the moment he could crumble. And then, the woman from the back row spoke again. She hadn't sat down. Her voice, though not raised, resonated with an undeniable authority that cut through everything: Leo's fragile melody, the lingering whispers, the shuffling of feet. "That boy," she said, her voice ringing with a sudden, fierce clarity that made everyone, including Mark's group, fall utterly silent, "is not poor. He is rich in courage. Rich in a talent that many of you, with all your comfortable advantages, will never even glimpse, let alone cultivate." Every head in the auditorium swiveled towards her. This time, there was no annoyance, only rapt, stunned attention. She took a few steps forward, into the aisle, and the faint light from the stage caught her features. She was older than I first thought, perhaps in her late 50s, with silver threaded through her dark hair, which was pulled back severely from a face that was striking, intelligent, and etched with lines of experience. She wore a simple black dress, elegant in its austerity. There was an air about her, an unmistakable aura of someone accustomed to being heard. "I am Dr. Eleanor Vance," she continued, her voice a little softer now, but no less compelling. "I was a student at the school a very long time ago. I sat in this very auditorium on one of these very uncomfortable seats, dreaming of a life in music. And for the past 30 years, I've been a professor of music at the conservatory downtown and a concert guitarist." A collective gasp, a rustle of recognition, went through the room. Dr. Eleanor Vance. Her name was legendary in local music circles. Even I knew it. She was a renowned classical guitarist, a composer, someone who rarely made public appearances outside of concert halls or university lecture rooms. What was she doing here at a middle school talent show? The teachers looked utterly dumbfounded, frozen in their seats. Mr. Henderson's jaw was slack. Mrs. Davison's hand was at her throat. Mark and his friends were staring, their earlier bravado completely gone, replaced by a mixture of awe and apprehension. Dr. Vance's gaze softened as she looked towards the stage, towards Leo, who stood frozen, his eyes wide, the guitar clutched to his chest like a shield. "Young man," she said, her voice gentle now, filled with a warmth that seemed to embrace him from across the room. "Your composition is exquisite. Your touch on that instrument. It's raw, yes, but it's deeply felt. And your courage to stand up here with a guitar that has clearly seen life and been loved, and share your soul with us. That is the heart of a true musician." She paused, her eyes sweeping across the audience, lingering for a moment on the section where the snickers had originated. Music isn't about the polish of your shoes or the label on your jacket. It's not about fitting in or sneering at those who are different. It's about vulnerability. It's about expression. It's about finding the melody within the noise. This young man, she gestured towards Leo, understands that. Perhaps some of you could learn from him. The silence that followed was profound. It wasn't the heavy, uncomfortable silence from before, but one filled with a dawning understanding, a sense of shame for some, and for others, a burgeoning respect. Then, slowly, Leo's fingers found the strings again. He looked, not at Dr. Vance, not at the audience, but down at his guitar, at the chipped edges and the strap we'd mended together. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, and he began to play again. This time, there was a difference. The trembling was gone. His touch was surer, the notes clearer, more confident. His voice, when he resumed singing, was still soft, but it held a new steadiness, a quiet power that flowed through the auditorium, silencing every doubt, every lingering sneer. But a single flame can pierce the night, a fragile hope, a burning light, and in its glow, the shadows cease, a whispered song, a heart at peace. His voice soared, unexpectedly strong on the final chorus, filling the space with a beauty that was both heartbreaking and uplifting. The kids who had been mocking him were now still, their heads bowed or turned towards him with a new, curious respect. The teachers sat straighter, their expressions a mixture of surprise and something akin to awe. I saw Mrs. Davison discreetly wipe a tear from her eye. My own eyes were blurred. I wasn't trying to be strong anymore, just letting the emotion wash over me. I found myself mouthing the words along with him, words I hadn't even realized I'd memorized from hearing them drift through his bedroom door night after night. My boy. My brave, talented boy. He wasn't just playing music, he was sharing his soul, a soul that had been nurtured in hardship, polished by perseverance, and now, finally, recognized. When the last note faded, a beat of pure, unadulterated silence hung in the air. And then, the applause started. Not polite, dutiful clapping, but a genuine, thunderous ovation that swelled and grew, washing over Leo in waves. He stood there, blinking against the sudden brightness as the stage lights came up a little, a shy, overwhelmed smile finally breaking through. He looked towards Dr. Vance, who was still standing, a gentle smile on her own face, and he gave a small, respectful bow. Then his eyes found mine again, and in them I saw not the fear and tension from before, but a radiant joy, a quiet triumph. My heart swelled so much I thought it might burst. The auditorium lights dimmed as my son stepped onto the stage and lit something no one could ignore. He had faced down the whispers, the judgment, armed with nothing but a worn guitar and a song from his heart, and in doing so, he hadn't just performed. He had revealed a strength and a beauty that transcended the scuffed sneakers and the thrifted blazer. He had shown them who he truly was. And in that moment, under the dimming lights, my son, my Leo, was incandescent.